exams, and I'd found this pictogram that I blatantly robbed, and I handed it in, and everyone thought it was amazing, and then a week later it was on every butter box and everything in the supermarket. So I learned quite early on that it's not good to blatantly steal, at least. But good news, redemption does come later on in the story. So then the second teacher, who was brilliant, who was my teacher at Wigan and Lee, he said, have you thought about university? And I was like, people like me don't go to university. That's not really a thing. I was probably going to be an electrician or something like that. Oh, this emoji's not going to work now. But that was an emoji. He said, you can drink whiskey and surf down the stairs on an ironing board, which I never did, but it sounded quite good. But what he actually done was he'd filled in the forms for Nottingham Trent for me and applied for me. And it's quite a moving thing. And after quite a difficult conversation with my parents, I managed to make it happen. So I rock up at Nottingham Trent University, 18 years old, 1997, and it changed my life. It was the best 3 years of my life. It was amazing. And I don't know what the course is like here. I was trying to pick Pete's brains earlier, but my BTEC was quite technical. It was very, I think it's changed a lot now, but mine was quite practical and technical. So it was like learning how to do packaging and logos and stuff like that. And when I got to uni, the first year was just drawing naked people and doing art and no like practical application at all. So it's quite mind-blowing in that sense, although I was definitely a slow starter, and it really came together in the final project of the final year for me. So I think that's another thing to bear in mind, is that it's okay to be finding your voice. Very few people start off with being brilliant at this stuff. It just comes with hard work and practice and looking at the world and taking reference and all that kind of stuff. So we skip forward to graduation. This is the only evidence I've got of my work, and you can tell it's not very good. I remember getting slated for my typography, which I did in Photoshop. I remember getting told off at my job interviews. But again, another random thing that changed my life was this project in particular was a live brief with a printing company in Nottingham, and I managed to win the brief, and I got £350 cash money, which was a lot of, it's probably still a lot of money now, but it was a lot of money then. And what it meant was I could move to London, at least temporarily. So I stayed in, and again, this is not me, but this is the room I stayed in a Halls residence in London. So in the summer, when the students are there, they rent them out for 20 quid a day. So 20 quid a day, Halls residence, 3 quid a day on food, and then I'd work for free doing internships, which I definitely don't recommend. You should get paid for working. But that managed to keep me in London for about a month, and in that time I managed to get a job. I had £20 left for a single train ticket to Bolton, stayed with my mum till the job started, and then moved back. And actually on our website, if you guys check it out, there's a really good blog piece, 10 top tips into getting a job in industry, that was written by all of our team. There's the URL. They put me on a PC. This was beautifully designed, so I have to apologise. But if you go there, there's some really good resources on actually the things you need to be thinking about to get your portfolio ready. And you can start soon, right? The internships can happen at any age, and reaching out to companies and finding companies that you like as well is really important, like starting to get a short list of the agencies you like and creating work that speaks to them. But if you read that blog, you find out a bit more. Anyway, so then the second big thing that happened randomly was a passerby who was a creative director of a very big brand company. There's a subplot to this, which is just shows how the sliding doors moments of life, I guess. So this is me and my work here. Oh God, they've missed a slide. Anyway, the next bit on the right-hand side was my best friend's work, and he was called Stu. So this guy we didn't know the name of came in to see our work, and he really liked Stu's work, but he didn't know which Stu. So if we go back to this picture, that's me and Stu, my best mate, inseparable. So you can imagine the agony of both of us getting called up for this job interview and there only being one job. Oh, there's a slide. Yeah. So that was really difficult, and it just shows how fragile these things are and how you've got to grab every opportunity when they arise. So the company was called Wolf Hollins. I don't know if you guys have heard of them, but they're kind of the daddies of branding. They're the big dogs, and they've done all this like amazing stuff, controversial stuff, Beatles stuff, etc. And it was really interesting. So I got the job. We're still friends, so that's good. And I didn't understand what branding was at all. So I was the first graduate they'd ever employed, and the reason for that is that graduates or junior designers are a huge investment of people's time to get from the level you're at as a student to a professional level. The speed in which we work at is insane, the thinking is insane, the strategic element and all the other bits. So a lot of agencies used to not bother. They used to just do more like a Man United thing, wait for that player to get really good and then sign them. So I was a kind of an experiment that didn't go really well in the first years. The first year I basically was scanning, this is before the internet. Can you imagine this? Probably not. So before the internet, if you wanted an image, you had to go onto a library that had books in, and you had to look at the books and find an image. And the requests I were getting were very, very specific. So I would spend 15 hours a day trying to find a specific image. Then when I got the image, it was a double spread, so you've got to Photoshop the spine of the book out and redo it all. So it could take like 3 days to find one image. And that was my first year's induction into the world of branding, which was amazing. It got better though. Second year, they shipped me off to New York for a year to work in the New York office, mainly because I was cheap and I didn't have a girlfriend. But anyway, and then the third year, we were working on a project in Brazil. Back in the day, we used to work in Europe a lot, which doesn't happen anymore, but a lot of London was seen as like maybe it still is, I don't know, but the kind of the epicenter of branding. So all these brands around the world wanted to work with London companies, and Wolf Hollins was the biggest. So they sent a group of us out to live in Rio for a year, which I know sounds terrible, but you've got Wayne as an art worker, Marina was creative director, David was an architect, I was a junior designer, and then Elspeth was a project manager. So you got that whole team on the ground doing this job. The job was this company, not very, well, no, it was actually interesting, just not a very good name. So it means telephone by the sea, Telemar, and they wanted to change the name. At the time, I didn't speak Portuguese, and everyone kept saying oi to me, and I was like, what's oi? What does oi mean? And it means hi in Portuguese. So we're like, well, let's just call it oi. And the brilliance of the internet not being very old is we bought oi.com for £5, and if I just bought more URLs, like, oh yeah, I'd be a millionaire. Anyway, so we called it oi, and this looks quite basic now, but at the time it was quite revolutionary because branding was all very rigid and brand strips and stuff. So we had this idea of a changing logo that that was like a speech bubble, and you put it to different people. It's all very obvious now, but at the time, I promise you, it was revolutionary. There was a really interesting, maybe not really interesting, interesting in the sense of it shows how far technologies have come. We presented the work to them, and the CEO was like, I love it. I just don't like the white logo. We're not like, Brazil's not what we're colourful. So all these were white logos at the time. And we used to present on boards. Like, so we had these huge printouts, take hours to print and mount. So it was decided that I was to get on a plane from Rio to go back to our London office to reprint the boards with the yellow logo, fly back to Brazil without sleeping and represent the work. So it's like a 36-hour round trip of flying, printing, flying, presenting, and the client's like, yeah, great, we'll do that. So yeah, we've moved on a lot from there. But what was pretty cool was we got these old biplanes and painted them up in the brand colours, and we got them to fly. None of this is Photoshop, I promise you. We got them to fly over Rio and write "Oi" in the sky in the vapor trails. So that was pretty cool, and that's an actual photo of it, not a comp. And that was my first ever billboard, which was quite a proud moment in a place called Ipanema, which is like the bougie bit of Rio. And the other nice thing we did with David, the architect, was we made these waterproof, the phones came in these cases that would then be like a beach thing, so you could put your phone in your wallet and they'd be waterproof basically, so the seawater didn't get in. And stuff, and then it was a really kind of out there brand, so they would sponsor all the best surfers, they'd have like concerts, and they had buses that take you to surfing breaks and stuff. So it was a really youthful, visible, brilliant brand, and the second job I'd ever worked on really, so it was kind of great to see the impact of what we can do, what we can have as designers. And maybe like the weirdest award I've ever won is a Guinness World Record for the fastest startup to get to 1 million customers in 1 week. And we had to create an ad campaign to ask people to stop buying the product because the network was going to collapse. So that was good. And then another solid recommendation is try and get your logos made in cast iron. Because even if they change the logo of the company, they never bother to change the grate. So that will stick around longer than I will, which is good. And then the other big icon was these, what we call Orleans, these big ears. So it's equivalent of our phone boxes. And these would be hundreds of them on every street in the whole of Rio. So when we first did the job, it was brilliant. You just see your brand everywhere. As I go back to Brazil now, it's kind of less, maybe less perfect and beautiful, but in true Brazil style, they always find a way to make it work. Anyway, I'm going to play a little family film, which is a bit weird, but there's reason for it. But I'll play it anyway if it works.
É pau, é pedra, é o fim do caminho, é o resto de toco, é um pouco sozinho, é um caco de vidro, é a vida, é o sol, é a noite, é a morte, é o laço, é o anzol, é peroba do cão,
é o nó da madeira, é o matita pereira,
é madeira de vento,
da ribanceira,
é um mistério profundo,
é o queira ou não queira,
é o vento ventando, é o fim da ladeira, é a viga, é o vão, festa da comida,
é a chuva chovendo, é conversa ribeira das águas de março, é o fim da canseira,
é o pé, é o chão,
é a mastradeira,
passarinho na mão,
pedra de atiradeira,
é uma ave no céu,
é uma ave no chão,
é um regato, é uma fonte,
é um pedaço de pão,
é o fundo do poço, é o fim do caminho, no rosto o desgosto, é um pouco sozinho, é um estrepe,
é um prego,
é uma ponta,
é um ponto,
é um pingo,
pingando,
é uma conta,
é um conto,
é um peixe, é um gesto,
é uma prata brilhando,
é a luz da manhã,
é o tijolo chegando,
é a lenha, é o dia, é o fim da picada, é a garrafa de cana, o estilhaço na estrada,
é o projeto da casa, é o corpo na cama, é o carro enguiçado, é a lama, é a lama,
é um passo,
é uma ponte,
é um sapo,
é uma rã
é um resto
de mato
na luz
da manhã,
são as águas de março fechando o verão, é a promessa de vida no teu coração.
So it's kind of a transformational year in a way. I was 21 years old, a junior designer, fell in love with my boss and creative director, and we ended up getting married and having twins and building a whole life. So we got a house in Rio. I speak Portuguese. My kids are half Brazilian. So it just shows how these random things can totally just transform your life and take you in different places. So we worked together, which is never a good thing. So I left to start a company called Venture 3, which you've probably never heard of, but it was good for a while. We had this really cool office in Mayfair, and this is where we started doing these kind of mass fantastic projects in a way. We started with Sky, which looked like this. And this is what branding looked like when I started out. So that's why the OI thing, even though it looks basic now, was different. So brand strip at the bottom, logo, big message. That was corporate identity. And the brief was to transform Sky, but not to change the logo. So that's what we did. And what were we thinking? The big TVs had just come out at that time, big shiny glassy TVs, and Sky was a satellite dish retailer, and we were like, you should be an entertainment company, which sounds really simple, but it was quite transformational for them. And one thing I love doing is when you do a mock-up, you're like, you know, your vans shouldn't look like this, they should look like the carnival coming to town. So when you're getting your Sky plugged in, all the neighbours' curtains are twitching and they're all jealous because they want it. And you think, oh, it's never going to happen. And then a few years later, I saw one of these vans in the street, and you're like, all right, that's kind of like, you know, when you have that idea in a thing and then it happens, it's quite nice. So this has been going on for 20 odd years, and we've iterated it over the years, but it's kind of stayed true to its core thing of being this kind of super premium entertainment brand that kind of leans into content. And I managed to find this the other day, which shows the transformation of the actual logo over the years. It's quite subtle but quite meaningful. And I remember when we first came up with this idea, the technology didn't really exist to do it, so it was a bit of a fudge. And then that's the evolution of Sky in 20 years, in 2 seconds. And then I'm going to show you 2 films, and the reason I'm showing you them is really about the power of ideas. You know, this idea of going from a dish retailer, you know, somebody selling dishes like a boring company, to an entertainment company. We didn't really believe it ourselves, but that kind of transformed the campus, it transformed the offer, everything to what Sky is today. And when we first started doing it, we were borrowing other people's content, but the long-term plan was to make our own. So it was really nice when we made this film with Dustin Hoffman when we launched Sky Atlantic. And it's almost like we come full circle on that thinking of like a glib statement of being an entertainment company to realizing that with this.
Stories. We all spend our lives telling them about this, about that, about people. But some stories are so good, we wish they'd never end. They're so gripping that we'll go without sleep just to see a little bit more. Some stories bring us laughter, and sometimes they bring us tears. But isn't that what a great story does? Makes you feel. Stories that are so powerful, they really are with us forever.
Sky Atlantic, a brand new channel, free and exclusive for all Sky TV customers. Sky, believe in better.
And that's what's great about working with big clients, is you get big budgets to do nice things. This is a sport one we did. What we do is train graphic designer, but filmmaker, illustrator, photographer, you know, all those different skills that copywriter, all the different bits kind of come together at different phases in your life with different projects, and you kind of just say yes to everything and then you have to work out how to do it after. Anyway, moving on. So, time to leave V3. The whole digital revolution kind of, if I'm honest, passed us by. We were really big into filmmaking, motion, and 3D. And I just had a feeling that I needed to kind of go and retrain myself and learn. I think you guys are probably all digitally native, but at the time it was quite an alien thing, because we were doing these huge billboards, loads of real estate, loads of space, and now you're asking us to design these little squares, and it was quite hard. So moved around a little bit, but ended up at a company called Design Studio, which you guys should have heard of, or you should check out if not. And again, another seemingly random act of while I was looking for a new job, I went to see a company, I can't remember the name, it was like brand something, really corporate brand agency. But I met this guy who was really nice, and I realised it was the wrong job for me. I'm not very good at B2B, the kind of more businessy stuff. But we got on really well, and he remembered me, and he did this. And he ended up leaving that company, and Premier League asked him to put a pitch list together of brand agencies. And he remembered me from that job interview, found out I was at Design Studio, and sent us the pitch invitation for the Premier League. And I can still remember how I felt. It was like, that's the whole reason I was put on this planet, was to do this brief. And it's terrifying when it's a pitch, because it's ultimately out of your control. But you just got to back yourself and be confident. So I kind of threw everything I had into this pitch, which I've never shown anyone, and there's a reason for that. It's really shit. But the brand was this. Okay, it's a total mess. The big thing was they were moving away from Barclays Premier League to Premier League, and if you kill Barclays, then there's no brand left. So that was one thing. The brand was also set up for a very old-fashioned broadcast world. It feels a bit British Airways, British government, bit Brexit maybe, I don't know. Anyway, we got some. I mean, this is the really important bit of what we do, is taking on board all of the information that you have, whether it's the brief, the inputs, or speaking to fans, or research, or anything like that. And there's kind of a couple of key things here. One is, if you look at this bottom left here, that's an eye tracker heat map of how people read logos, and in particular this one. So basically, everyone looks at the face, right? Why? Because it's a face. We're humans, we're attracted to, that's how we communicate. So that was a kind of a big insight of where we took it. And then the other one was this sense of 90% of fans know that the Premier League is a lion. So excuse the crudeness of this, but this was what we came back with in the pitch. It was like basically a digital first icon that reimagines Premier League. I don't think we quite reimagined it in the pitch. It's pretty dodged, but there's a few nice ideas, like bringing in charities and sponsors and stuff. And this is almost a good-looking slide, but the rest was annoyingly bad. But that looks all right. You know, like super modern sports brand, not a stuffy rights holder kind of thing. And then we had a little go at some dodgy apps and put it on a trophy. And then I remember about a year later, I was in Asbury, New Bond Street, with the actual trophy, with a bunch of black and white printouts of the logo, trying to work out what size to engrave it on, and absolutely crapping my pants. I was going to get it wrong. Anyway, we did the pitch. It went really well. It was more of a strategic pitch. So the pitch was about 200 pages, of which the creative was a little bit. And I was quite happy, and I was in a cab, and I was on my way to the airport to go to Machu Picchu to meet up with my wife, who was speaking at a conference there, and had blagged me a free +1. When the phone rang, and I was in the cab on the M4 on the way to Heathrow, and the client said, "You've done really well, you're in a really good position for winning the pitch, but they need to see that you can craft." And I was like, fair point. So, turned the cab around, went back to the office, called Marina, said, "I'm not going to see you in Machu Picchu, I've got to draw 300 lions." So I had to go back and start really putting in the craft into taking their lion and chopping its head off, to working through what this could be, and kind of got myself in a bit of a knot, really, of this regal thing. And these are fun. We did thousands of them. None of them are right, because none of them are a logo. They're way too complicated. They're not modern enough. So at the 2,600th time of trying, I got it. I actually had it before this, and the client had signed it off, and I said, "You can't have it, it's not right. Give me another week." And I went back and crafted, and his face was just a bit sloppy, wonky. Never really drawn lions before. Redemption, by the way, for the lion stealing earlier. So anyway, we got to this. It was really good, and quite a shift from where they were on the left to what they were on the right. And again, thinking, this is 8 years ago, digital first brand, that was quite revolutionary. Made a few enemies, especially in broadcast, with that kind of thinking. But that was my vision, is that it would sit on a app tile and look perfect with nothing else. And weirdly, as crude as that is, from a conceptual point of view, it's exactly the same thing. You know, the thinking was right, just the execution of crafting it takes so long to get that. And again, there was a couple of big points we wanted to make, which was this new brand should sit in an ecosystem of really modern brands, like really modern everyday sports brands that you might engage with on a match day, whether that's going to a Champions League game and staying in an Airbnb or creating a playlist or whatever. Premier League should fit comfortably in there. And I think we achieved that to some degree. We're still on that journey. Secondly, like epic digital functionality. So the favicon, which is that green circle there, I think it's like 24 pixels or something, the actual lion. So to get a logo that looks beautiful, big, and can be like that big, was kind of our original vision. And all of that was done in 4 weeks because Nike had a crushing deadline to print 1 billion footballs for their global audience, and they needed a logo to go on the balls. So it was a pretty hectic four-week sprint to get the logo, and then it took longer to do everything else. I think what I wasn't ready for is I never worked on a brand of this importance, this scale. So they put me up to be the voice of the rebrand. So I had to go and do these like news conferences with I had to do the print media, the TV media, everything, sport, everyone. And everyone then obviously got their say on social, which is fine, right? It's expected. And I always think that it's a good thing. If people love it, I think you've messed up. Like, it's not brave enough. So I quite like this. I keep them as well. Maybe it's a bit weird, but I keep the. I've got a catalogue of all my brands, and there's like 3 weeks of vitriol and hatred, and then people kind of come around to liking it. This was a nice moment. Gary Lineker was into it. That was nice, and then back to square one. The problem was, and this is a big learning, right? We created this key viz, so we created 4 logo lockups, right? Depending on the size of the artwork you're creating, so you could pick one of these. The media didn't understand it. They thought that was the logo: 4 lion heads, 4 Premier League word marks, 4 colours. So everyone, even on Soccer AM, they were going, "Why has it got 4 lions?" You're like, "No, it's 4 versions of the same thing." Anyway, The Guardian, which is a design-driven, design-led newspaper, ran a competition to see if the public could do a better version of the logo, which I will let you decide if they succeeded. But you see, they've all copied the 4 up. They think it's not the logo. So, yeah, I mean, there's some good options, but they stuck with ours. And I told you I'd never shown anyone this before, but it must have got out because I saw this in a pub, which is clearly inspired by that logo. And it's quite a hard logo to draw, so you do get a lot of dodgy representations. Anyway, onwards. So, dream job, dream client, just launched Premier League, it's all going well, it's brilliant. Ended up having a blazing row with my bosses on a Friday night over something and nothing, and ended up quitting on the Monday in a completely random fashion. I was still working with the Premier League, so I went in-house and worked with them for a little bit, but then I had this non-compete of a year where I couldn't speak to the Premier League. So through that kind of, I guess that energy of an argument, whatever, feeling the injustice of it, whatever, you kind of channeled that into what is now Nomad, which is our agency. So the idea really was not to set up an agency, it was to be this kind of one-man band with a rucksack, hence the name Nomad, that would go and kind of help advise on brands. It sounds great, but they were like, "Great, can I get a logo?" And it's like, "Well, I don't really design anymore." So ended up hiring a junior designer, and then kind of moving on from there. And then this is today. I had to blur these two out here. You might be able to tell what that middle one is. But I'm going to show you a bit of that later. And if you stick around, I can show you the actual thing. But that's the Natural History Museum in the middle, which is about to launch. The one on the right is a company called Pets at Home, which is the UK's biggest pet shop. And then the others, you know. But yeah, a real mixed bag of mass fantastic brands. And it's weird, right, that you set out on this journey doing Sky and Oi and stuff like that 20 years ago, and it still defines your career 20 odd years later. It's like, we're not doing small stuff, and this is not necessarily better or worse, it just is. And through the Premier League as well, we've kind of become this kind of de facto, we didn't really set out to be, but we've become this kind of sports branding expert. So we do a lot of stuff with leagues, which any football fan will know, or any sport fan, leagues, rights holders, and clubs as well. So we do a lot of club branding. And the first job we got at Nomad was Sky Sports, and that was partly because of my relationship with Sky, and partly because I'd been to see the big dog at Sky Sports, the Premier League work, and scared the pants off him. And he was feeling like, God, if the Premier League's going to go like that, we look really old-fashioned. So they ended up asking if I would come in to Sky, like literally into their office and work with them to rebrand it. So this was 7 years ago. We did all the bits, you know. But basically we turned it from a linear channels of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to these kind of specific channels of Premier League and F1 and stuff. And then each channel had its own kind of look and feel. We created this base plate typeface, and then each channel got like a cut of the typeface. It got colorway, it got a logo bug and stuff. So yeah, I'll just show a few of these channels. Boxing was quite fun. We did this a little bit later. So yeah, that was fun. That was about 9 months working at Sky near Heathrow Airport. And that year, that was our first year as an agency, and we got into this top 50 studio, I can't remember what it's called, like best studios in London or something. So that was kind of good. And felt like we'd arrived with a big client off the bat, which kind of made it a bit easier. And then a year to the day, Premier League called us up and said, we can work together now. So that was great. And we took what was pretty basic brand that I did at DS, the design studio, and turned it into the brand that you kind of see today. So still the multicolored stuff, but we evolved all the bits. And this is what it was, really. It was some textures and a logo. And we expanded the kit of parts out to illustration. We created the trophy icon, the partner badge, all the different bits, put some more colors in. And that gave us this kind of, this palette to be able to do everything the Premier League does, so broadcast design, match day, inventory, digital. And then what was really nice, we got to create this campaign from scratch, really. So we came up with a name for No Room for Racism. It was a difficult time in sport to see this come back, to be honest, having grown up with some of this stuff. So it's kind of sad that we needed to do this, but it was also a great privilege to be part of creating a really important asset for Premier League. And a lot of the work we do starts with a story at the heart of it. I'm not going to read this, but that's a really good way of telling your kind of idea in a short form way of kind of storytelling, and then creating the kit of parts where literally crushes out all the space. So there's literally no room for racism. And that went out across all the Premier League touch points and all the partners as well. So you probably, I think last weekend or the weekend before, there was a big No Room for Racism weekend. It's on the shirts now permanently with the badge that we did. And then we did a lot of print and outdoor media. And we even worked with EA Sports. We designed this kit that went into the FIFA game that you could pick to play. So that was quite fun. And motion design is a really big part of what we do as well. Kind of everything we do is made to move, whether that's fantasy. I don't know if any of you guys play fantasy, but we just redid that this season. And then there's nice projects like 30 Years anniversary. It was quite nice. We've just done a project that I can't show you, but we've actually created a new brand for the competition next season. So you'll see that in maybe May, June time. We work with their broadcast partner and all that stuff, and I just saw your amazing esports studio, but we did the brand for Premier League, which is the esports competition, which is fun. We do all the medals and everything as well, so I've got one of the Premier League medals at home, pretending that I'm a footballer when I'm not. And the other thing, really nice thing that came off the back of Norm for Racism was this work we did with Saatchi and BT called Hope United. Saatchi's came to us. They'd had the idea for the club. They wanted a logo. We gave them, this is the BT logo, we gave them this. So it was a H for hope, a halo for unity, a hashtag, and the BT logo all smashed together. And there's a little film here, I think. So that was a really nice collaboration with Saatchi's. So we did the logo, we did the campaign. They were a bit useless if not filming. But then we had to do this photo shoot with the players, and no one had thought about the kit. So normal kit suppliers, as we have with our laces guys, about 6 weeks. They needed it in 24 hours. So we ended up getting a Central St. Martin's fashion student who went to Nike Town, bought a football shirt, deconstructed it, made the cuts out textures, and handmade every shirt. It was printed onto the material and then heat stuck on. I don't remember. So we had to make all the different sizes for all the different players. That is not a Photoshop comp. That's a real photo. We touched it up a bit, but that is Piccadilly Circus for anyone who doesn't know London. That was cool. Stuff. It had a really good impact as well, which was not just talking about stuff, but getting people to actually change behaviours and call people out. I haven't got, the picture was that. So that was a shot we had to do. So I can't remember how many people there were, but we had to make all the kits by hand. Jordan Henderson kicked off a little bit because it wasn't a Nike, there's a bit of prima donna stuff, but it was all good. And that went down really well. And that's in its second season now, where we're working with coding hate, and then creating textures from that. So, okay, almost there, guys. So, as part of the work we do in sport, that being such a big part of what we do, we felt it was really important to give back to the community. So, one of the things we did a few years ago as a company was get involved with a brilliant football community club called Hackney Laces. So we're in Hackney in London, they're in Hackney. This is Katie, the founder, who's amazing. Again, I had a better typeface, I promise you. But the club is all about, really, it's much more than football. It's about belonging, and it's about empowering young women through the power of football. It's a brilliant thing. We said, how can we help? They said, well, when I watch telly, real footballers have sponsors. So we're like, cool, we can do that. So we did a few things. We designed the kit. We also bullied Nike, because at the time, Nike didn't make women's kit. Women had to roll up men's shorts. So we kind of called them out on that and made Nike make women's kit, which was a big moment, together with Laces. So we made the kit. Then we did a photo shoot with the girls as well, which was super fun. Because ultimately, this is much more than what happens on the pitch. It's a kind of a lifestyle thing. And the kit was really important. I haven't got a picture, but before they all just wore their own shirts, so they didn't feel like they belonged together, because a uniform or a kit or something can bring people together. So it was actually a really important thing. And then we did a shoot in our studio with the girls, which was super fun. that didn't work. PowerPoint, man. Anyway, they were dancing. Then Nike said, we're going to hand paint these billboards for you across London. And we're like, cool, that's great. So we've got our laces, stars in the ads. So we got them all down. There was like 4 locations in London where they were. They were absolutely beautiful, hand-painted murals.
Bit more. Okay.
Herding sheep is the expression I would use for trying to get these guys to behave. So they're all, yeah, it doesn't work. But we got the shot. It was really nice. And we've done loads of cool stuff with laces over the years. This is our team at one of the other sites as well, and then a few other bits. We did all the social comms and made that look cool on Instagram. Maybe this will play. What's really nice is seeing the impact that has. So there's 4 clubs. There's 3 in London, 1 in Manchester. So each club's got a different colour. But seeing that's my kids in the bottom right, and James who works at Nomad. Seeing all your friends around Hackney wearing the shirts is really cool, and the impact and the confidence it has. And it's caused a bit of a stir. But Ian Wright's got involved. We had a documentary on BBC. The women's Euros have been great as well, and then this is Hackney. So that's Terry, my business partner, with his daughter, a friend of ours in California. So everyone we know gets a laces shirt in a presentation box, and my kids go out running. They're identical twins, which helps, but they go out running in Hackney and they get shouted at and like cheered on by all the laces girls. And we even managed to get it in the Design Museum in the best kits or something, classic kits. There it is. So that's really fun and a good thing to do. Okay, last bit. So, a dream and a bit of a nightmare. So, we were invited to pitch for this, the Natural History Museum rebrand project, which was really exciting, but also really terrifying. It turns out there's 320 agencies pitched for the job, and Nomad was invited because they wanted a kind of a digital first moving brand, but we didn't have the creds to get past the first stage. So my wife is a Pentagram partner. I don't know if you guys know Pentagram, but you should if you don't. She's the kind of museum guru, so she did Tate and South Bank and loads of big art institutions. So we decided to partner and collaborate on this. So they would be the kind of art experts, if you will, and we'd be the kind of digital motion experts. So that was interesting in itself. This doesn't happen that often of 2 companies kind of partnering on a pitch or on a project. I need to talk you through the brief a little bit, just so you can get where we're coming from. But this is where we kind of got to. So there's a kind of a tipping point for the Natural History Museum, which is pretty much a tourist destination for rainy Saturdays, right? It's raining in London, take your kids there, it's fine. And it's full of dead stuff. If you're being a bit mean, it's like catalogues of dead chickens and stuff like that. So the idea was to and with them and with their brief as well, was to kind of flip that on its head. So to turn them into a scientific leader and a climate champion. So to turn people like us into activists for the planet through the power of their catalogue and their expertise. Great. Okay, so this idea of a static museum and tourist attraction to an active platform where people can engage. And this is really important, this kind of like looking back at dead stuff in history or stuffed animals, which has got a big question mark around it in terms of whether that's cool anymore, having stolen all this. I don't want to get too deep into that, but there's question marks around the provenance of a lot of these catalogues. So shifting that into much more into now, how we can, their catalogue is used to understand how to fight SARS outbreaks and chicken pox and COVID, because they can look back in the DNA of animals for hundreds of years. So to turn that museum into a platform, in the brief, one of the big challenges was the name. It's really difficult, right? Natural, what does that mean? History, old stuff, museum, space. So and it's really long, and there's a natural history museum in every major city in the world. So America's got one, Brazil's got one, everywhere. So we knew we couldn't change the name, but we wanted to find a kind of a workaround or a hack to the name that would make it feel more modern. So basically the pitch we made to them was, your name frames you as a history specialist, museum puts you in a space, and if we could just flip that on its head, imagine what we could do. And look, people have done this before, right? Is the best institutions in the world have a shortcut. So could we be more like that? And so we came up with this idea of the time is now, and I was lying in bed thinking, fucking hell, how do we win this job? This is really important. And I was like, what's the shorthand? Like, there's got to be a thing. And I was lying in bed going, okay, there's an N and then there's an O, and if there was just a W, we could have like now, and we could call it the now, but there's not a W, there's only an M. And I was like, what if you flip the museum on its head? Would that work? So I got up at like 3 a.m, turned on my Mac and did this in like Helvetica, and I was like, oh fuck, that could work. And the position of it was great as well. So I was like, okay, that could work. I maybe could turn this up. So this was the pitch we went in with. So logo, and then we actually thought you'd actually do both, and then you'd transition to now, even if you needed to. But the idea of being a shorthand was quite fun. This is what you need. The level you need to do to win a pitch is insane. It costs hundreds of thousands of pounds in man hours to put this together on a whim that you're probably not gonna. Well, this time we did, but. Most often you don't win. So loads of stuff, and this is only a fragment of what we showed, but everything again moving and showing the digital nature of it. Stuff, signage. I mean, it's quite an impressive bit. When we drove past, it's like, God, our logo's going to be on there. It's really scary to think that you really want to get it right. And difficult client, like limited budget, etc. But anyway, loads of stuff. So we pitched, it went really well. Then we didn't hear for ages, and then they called us up at it was winter, maybe 2 years ago, a year and a half ago, and they told us we'd won. So me and Marina were in the kitchen, crying with joy. We couldn't believe it. It's like, this is the biggest job ever. It's amazing. And then they said, but there's one thing. It's like, what's that? It's like, you can never show this work again. This is dead. And we're like, why? You bought, you must like it because we've won the pitch. He goes, yeah, we love it. We're never going to do it. It's too whatever. We're never going to do it. And what we're worried about is that you've put so much effort into that, we're worried you can't walk away from it. So we had to agree to park that and never champion it, fight for it, show it again to them. So that was really tough. And then we had to go again with a blank sheet of paper. We've done it. Not as good. No, maybe don't tell Marina that. But it's one of those challenges where you can have all the logic in the world. I think that's such a gift to have that sitting in your name for 150 years, ready for your new strategy. It was such a gift, and they're not brave enough to do it, which is a shame. But it's life, and you just have to push people as far as you can. And I think if I can leave you with one thing, it's like the idea is everything, right? Because I can't even design anymore, but I can come up with an idea that can help define how that design looks and tell that story and convince clients that that's the right thing to do. So before you design, kind of nail that idea, understand, and that's one other thing, is the idea is always in the brief. So that now was in the brief. You just had to know how to find it and then put it into that work and into that idea. So, so back to that point is like, you've no idea where your life will go, and don't try and direct it too much. Just be open to as many opportunities as possible. Work your ass off so that you get those opportunities and make every moment count. And that is it. But before, I do want you to ask questions. So thank you.
Massive thank you. Sorry. How inspirational was that? I hope you've seen something that's really stood out to you today. With an amazing story. One of our own alumni, an NTU student once, weren't you?
Once, yeah.
Yeah.
I was as young as you once.
Yeah. Why not just go out there and do it yourselves? You can. Just do it.
Totally.
Right.
And, yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Well, you don't you don't have to be like the best person in the class even. You just have to work hard. It's that simple. Like talent, you can learn a lot of this stuff. You'll see people around you who are just so much better than you. I was definitely that person where everyone was better. Yeah, but if you just work hard and keep plugging away and learning stuff, then you can kind of come together. Yeah.
That's fantastic. Right, have we got any questions? Have we got a microphone?
Here we go.
Where's our roaming mic? Right then, hands up. You'll probably want the mic over here.
All right, yeah.
There we go.
Can you take that one off? Yeah.
I think you can. Hello.
Hi, I'm Mike. I was just going to ask, you said graphic design has changed so much, kind of even since you began. I was just wondering, like you said, you had to retrain for the digital age and stuff since you began. So I was just wondering where you think the kind of future of graphic design lies, and which key skills do you think will kind of never be replaceable with kind of advancements like AI and everything?
Very good question. Okay, so on the first bit, you'll see if you guys really need to be looking at the top 10 agencies that are doing work, because it's fascinating what's happening at the moment, that it's changing again massively. So if you check out Koto, Ragged Edge, Design Studio, you'll see that there's a whole new way of branding happening. It's this kind of modular, digital first, digital product design. So the big new thing is these kind of animated icons. Icon used to be really corporate and boring. Now, if you see the Netflix job or the Wise job that have come out recently, they've got these beautiful kind of 3D, like really lush icons. So it's already happening again. And the thing I'm thinking about is, do we try and copy that, which is bad, right? Like, I've proven that earlier. Or do you try and predict the next trend? And I think you've got to be that. So the best agencies are setting a trend, almost setting a trap. So they set a trend, everyone does that, and then they go here and create something different. So Collins in America is a really good example of that. They set a trend through illustration, and then they pivot, everyone does that, and then they look always fresh and new. So the best agencies are doing that. In terms of the AI question, it's fascinating because I've got friends who are amazing 3D renderers. They're screwed. They're totally done. But ideas can never, ever, ever be replaced. So you still need someone to input the AI with an idea, and that has to be us. So your career will start off as a traditional there is no as a designer, but your value is actually as a thinker. So you can't set up a company just being a graphic designer. You need to be a strategist and a copywriter, and you need to understand how clients work and how to build relationships. And you'll learn all of that through your career. And those are the skills that are irreplaceable, and those are the skills that add epic value. And actually, the difficult thing is when you get in your 30s, you have to start stepping away from the tools because you're too expensive as a designer. You become a creative director and you have to scratch your chin and go to meetings and schmooze clients. But that actually unlocks a whole new career for you, and it kind of refreshes you and you go again, and you learn all the softer skills of people skills and relationships and stuff. So it's a beautiful journey, and design is really like the rocket that gets you there, but then it's allowing all the other things to creep in to make sure that you stay relevant. And I think it's a constant, for you guys even more, right? I've had, really, digital's been the biggest thing, but with you guys, there'll be so many changes that not, like this may not happen in the future, but thinking will always be a valuable asset and resource. Okay, tote bag, great question. There was some more here. Oh, I'm going to run out of tote bags, aren't I? Sorry.
Hello there.
Hey.
So I'm going to ask, how would you, like, what would your top tips be for preparing yourself for, like, a client brief?
Well, read it. I mean, it sounds a bit silly, but loads of people don't read the brief. My guys wouldn't read the brief. They would just start designing. So I will spend days reading, rereading, chopping it up, highlighting, thinking about it before I even go anywhere else. And there's such a skill to that, because as designers, we're kind of impatient. We don't like paperwork, Word files, you know. So it is like, I think the brief is everything, and trying to read the client's mind of what they're trying to get to, but then also understanding their world. So we do like competitor benchmarking. So here's your brand today, here's all your competitors. Isn't it interesting they all look the same? We think you should act more like these guys over here that are not your competitors. And then I think probably finally is you get thrown into such different worlds. It could be cryptocurrency, it could be e-gaming, it could be fintech, it could be sports. Immersing yourself in that world and understanding what fintech is, for example, or what e-gaming is and why people love it and how people engage with it. So you have to become a bit of a ninja kind of person who goes into these categories and just kind of read everything, watch stuff, follow people, immerse yourself in that world so you can think like the client and understand their challenges a little bit. But my big point was that Natural History Museum is the answer. My boss told me the answer's always in the brief. You just have to know how to find it. So we're often trying to overcomplicate things and make some thing here when actually there's a really simple gift in the name which unlocks the strategy, which makes sense. So it's not being afraid of the obvious in some ways as well. I hope that answers.
When you get given a brief, what is your design process when creating something that could be quite impactful and important and can be seen across different medias and platforms?
Good question. I think the process is always the same. So we do, this is interesting, or maybe it's not, but it's part of what we do, is the first thing we do with a client is a workshop, and it's very analog. So we'll spend hours with them in a room doing weird exercises like, if you were an animal, what animal would you be? Which sounds really naff and cheesy. We've got better at that stuff, but it's really about trying to understand the client's aesthetic, the client's challenges, and all that stuff, and to build a really good relationship with them where you build that trust. Because ultimately, you want to take them somewhere where they're not comfortable, and if you do that too quickly, they'll reject it, like Natural History Museum. But Premier League was probably the bravest job I've ever done with the most conservative client. And the way we did that was bringing them into the process, because we only had 4 weeks. We set up a war room with all these boards, and every Friday the bosses would come to our studio, and we made them in their suits come to the hip part of London and see all the workings, which clients would never see because most of it was shit. It was sketches and scamps. But because they saw it unfold, they felt part of the journey and part of the process, and then they bought a more revolutionary idea. If we'd have gone away for a month and said we're going to chop the lion's head off and make it pink, they would probably have rejected it. But because we took them on that journey, so it's about relationships, it's about understanding how you solve the client's problem, but take them somewhere that maybe makes them feel a bit uncomfortable.
My question.
Someone here.
Sorry.
No, it's just for a tote bag.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, your hand went up first. Yeah. Sorry.
My question's kind of like, when you give your design to a company, how do you deal with the aftermath if it gets rejected? Like, personally, how do you bounce back and go to another company and do another design, do it all over again?
In terms of projects?
Yeah, so like when you spend all this time on a project and it gets rejected, how do you keep your kind of self-esteem up to keep going, almost?
Well, again, it was very... So when I was at Wolf Hollins, we'd work on projects for a year or 2 years, and more often than not, it wouldn't happen. So we'd work on a project, top secret, work your ass off 2 years, and then basically the company were just doing that to put an extra few million on the set. So they'd sell the company, basically tart it up, sell it for a higher price, and then the brand disappeared. So we'd have a lot of that. So the first 10 years of my career, most of the work I did never saw the light of day, and that was very common. Now, most of the work everyone does sees the light of day. So the Natural History Museum is probably the closest thing. I was really into that work. I just felt it like nailed the brief. It's kind of, we try and find this thing of unquestionable. Like, you might not like the way it looks, but you can't question the thinking. It's like, if you're all about now and there's no... Yeah. So try and make it unquestionable. And then if it does happen, I mean, Marina, I worked with that on, she was really upset. I think there's a lot of it's quite personal, how you deal with it. I'm kind of like, you've got to get back on the horse and go again. What we all say in the community is like this idea of like, there's kind of every new client, every new job that comes to you, you have to have this uncensored optimism, like this is going to be the one. You can't go, oh God, fucking hell. Somehow you just have this like very childish thing of like being able to forget the trauma and then just throw yourself in to being hurt again. But it's the only way it works, and we all do it. It's kind of like in the unspoken designer code of how you do stuff. So that new brief comes in, it's really exciting, and you're just ready to go. But I mean, I could do a whole talk on all the projects that never saw the light of day. It's probably every designer's best portfolio, So yeah, boundless optimism. Okay, this. Lady here was first, I think. Because I'm running out of bags, that's all.
Thank you. My question kind of comes from personal experience of when you've made a project, how do you know when you're finally satisfied with it? So, for example, with your Premier League project, you did so many drawings of the logo. How do you know when you're finally satisfied? And you ever gone to a project where you've not been completely satisfied with it yourself, but I don't know how to say it, but the manager of the project is, but you, the designer, aren't? How do you really cope with that?
It's a really, really good question. And every job is like, you sweat that stuff so much. I'm quite old school. I'm obsessed with logos. Like, all I want to do is a logo. I'm not really bothered about the other stuff. I did that logo. So I sweat it and sweat it and sweat it. And honestly, we did thousands of the Premier League Lion. And you have to have that eye where there's a bit where you squint. Have you ever done that? If you squint and look at the negative space, I can just look at something now. I can censor stuff with my eye. Like I've got that precision of just looking at stuff for so many years. I just know. And also I know with the Sky logo, because of the descender of the Y, you can't censor it using the grid. You've got to optically do it. And the same with the Premier League. So there's all that stuff. You just look at it, and you just know deep inside. And I knew the Premier League logo wasn't right. It was all signed off. Everyone was happy. And I was like, you can't have it. It was really hard. I have to tell the most important man in football, he can't have his logo to go on a billion Nike balls because nobody says it's not ready. So you've got to do it because when it goes out, it's done. It's in, like the King logo's in 7 billion handsets, so you can't change it. And I've got a whole deck on the King. I did thousands of that drawing of the King crown to get it right. And I think it's just experience, and I might look at some of the earlier logos and they're not crafted, but anything I've done in the last 10 years, I just will not let leave the studio until you just kind of know. But you've got to sweat it as well. You've got to look at it on a black background in white background in black, small, big, try it in all different sizes and trust your gut on it. But it's the most important thing you'll do. And also, like from a very selfish point of view, you want that logo to stick around for a long time. It really sucks when you get your logo changed. So making it as great as possible, like the Sky thing, 20 odd years is great. And you see as well, we've changed that. It looked really shit, that first one. And then as times change, you kind of evolve it. Thank you. This is good, there's more. We're going on to the pin badges in a minute. It's the last one. Should have brought them on.
Hello.
Hello.
So I'm not in for the tote bag. That's why I kind of waited here.
Oh, hello.
I kind of waited for everybody to ask because I don't want to steal their tote bags.
Okay.
So listening to your pitch, by the way, thank you so much. That was amazing. You said you went back to your client saying that your lion wasn't good enough. How do you do that? I know there were so many situations where, not necessarily me, but I've seen situations where we would hand off a project because the client approved it, and we don't want to have that conversation where we say, we can make this better, this is not good enough, just give us a bit more time. So how do you do that? And especially with such a huge brand, as in the fear of backlash must be, petrifying, I guess.
It's these are all brilliant questions, thank you guys. Okay, so the really difficult thing with clients is they pay your wages, they're sometimes scary, they're often older than you think they're smarter than you, they are intimidating, and you cannot be intimidated by clients because you'll never do great work. So the way I think about it, I look at that person, even Richard Masters, who's the CEO of Premier League, he's just a guy who's got kids, he's probably got a shitty sofa because he's not got great taste. You try and humanize that person a little bit and not be intimidated by the title or the fact that they're paying your wages, because ultimately you've got to have that critical mindset where you can have and you have to build a relationship where you can have difficult conversations with them. And as long as it is in the good of the work, like I wasn't being difficult, it just wasn't right. And I've never drawn a face of an animal before, so the proportions weren't right. And I sat down with them and said, look, Richard, look at this. It's not quite right. And I convinced him to see what I could see, but I also gave him a solution. It's like, give me 24 hours and I will fix it for you. And then when you play it back, he's over the moon because it's even better. But a project manager, they would go nuts. They were like, why are you doing that? You're burning budget, the client signed it off, what's wrong with you? But I think you've always got to have that critical relationship to, like, ultimately, if you make the work great, then the client will be happy anyway. Don't spend too much time trying to make clients happy. That's been a big, not mistake, but a learning I've made over the years. It's very easy to make clients happy, but you need to be able to have those tough conversations with them, and and champion the work you believe in, not because you think it's right, but because it's right for them and it solves their problem. So yeah, I don't know if that answers your question.
No, it does. Thank you.
So my question is that you're looking at, like, your branding, you've done a lot of social issues like racism and different things. How do you navigate that and still keep it aesthetically pleasing, but also don't minimize the issues?
Very good question again. I think you don't treat it any differently than, so you make it look box office. So Hope United looks like a football club we might do. You don't treat it as a CSR thing. You don't turn the temperature down. You actually heat it up. I mean, the No Room for Racism is actually quite fun as a mechanic because it crushes the racism out of the word mark. So we treat it as we would treat any other project. There's obviously, it's difficult, right? Being a white guy is difficult to talk about racism in any legitimate way. So you need a team of people around you who can help navigate that. But I think what we try and do with that stuff is go, the thing I hate is when the CSR is on the back end of a website or on a special page. We want it on the front page of the Premier League, not on the CSR, click down, look at the good stuff we do. So make it feel powerful and immediate and help it rip out of busy feeds and social and out of a busy broadcast environment. So I think treat it exactly like you would any other project, box office, full energy. Don't skirt about the things, just face it head on.
And I have one more question. When you're doing subjects like this, do you do workshops or do you work with people who maybe had those shared experiences just to get a different perspective? Like, how do you navigate those subjects?
Yeah, always. So you have to be one more than that, which is have a diverse team as your team to start with. That every studio should have that. But yeah, we will work with fan panels. We will work with, in terms of the Premier League, they've got all kinds of resources that we can tap into and make sure that that feels right. And also, you've got to be careful that you're not, say with BT, the danger could be that you're trying to help them promote telephone services on the back of really topical, difficult issues. So it's got to be relevant and they've got to have skin in the game. And that's why I showed that slide where it's not good enough to just show a sexy picture of footballers in a kit. You've got to show how you are tackling online hate. So there's a bit of a skin in the game thing that we require from our clients to be able to make that feel credible and buyable by people.
Thank you.
Hi.
Hey.
Personally, you've got like a lot of like major like designs like under your belt, but would you want like the next big step for Nomad to be like, where do you as a creative director aspire for your like studio?
The first word that came into my head was retire, but no, I've got some more work to do. It's interesting because I felt like when I'd done the Premier League, I was like, oh, now I can set up an agency because I've scratched that itch. There's no bigger job I want to work on. And when we started Nomad, we were doing menu covers for shitty restaurants for 400. It was like proper pound shop design until we got Sky Sports, which was great. But then when the Natural History Museum pitch came in, it was like all those feelings came back. The thing with the pitch is that sucks, but it's brilliant. It's a bit like love. You fall in love, but you can't control how the other person feels. So you throw yourself into it, but the chances are you're going to be left heartbroken. And I kind of like that. So the Natural History Museum was probably that thing that made me feel alive again and got me back to my A game. It got me 2 a.m. dreaming about a thing and I couldn't sleep. And that doesn't happen all the time. So I don't know where the next thing would come from, and I don't necessarily need it to be big like that. I think meaningful is good. If you start thinking, you could put Natural History Museum together with Hope United and Rome for Racism and Hackney Laces. There's like a whole good stuff there, that branding with a social purpose rather than just mass fantastic. So maybe that. I think my biggest challenge now is managing people and trying to get them to create the ideas and the work and for it to be their voice but feel nomad. So that's a new interesting challenge as well.
Hiya.
Hello.
So, of course, you've been in the industry for a while. What would be your number one piece of advice for a new young graphic designer trying to get their foot through the door?
Speak to people like me. Like, I do a lot of stuff with NTU across the road, and you'd be amazed at how many people don't turn up to guest lectures or don't ask questions. You guys have been brilliant today. With those guys, sometimes no one will ask a question or no one will come and speak to you after. It's like, if you're not asking for my business card, you're nuts, because you need someone like me who's going to speak, like, come and show your work. Then you can show your work to 20 people, and those 20 people know 20 people. And once you get a grip, once you get an into the industry, it's actually really supportive and really helpful. So a lot of people are like really passionate about helping people like you get into industry. And if you think that passerby that I talked about earlier, like, he changed my life, and I've tried to tell him this 100 times. You know, you changed the entire trajectory of my life by taking a punt on me. And his thing was, just do this. When you're in a position to do it, do the same. So I think we all feel this sense of responsibility to help everyone like you to get into the industry. So there's no barrier, but to help yourself, I think, is connect. So I think the first thing is finding the best, like having a picture of all the agencies that you like, because and if you read that blog, it goes into more detail. But one of the things I talk about is, you never write a generic email like, dear sir, madam. You know, you go, dear Stu, I've been following, you know, you played to that, I've been following Nomad for years, love this, it speaks to me because of that, I created this work that was inspired by it, can I come and have a coffee with you? So really personal, interconnected things of your work to an agency's work that you like. Yeah, and then just trying to build that network. So on your Instagram, follow all these agencies, follow not just the agencies, but the designers who work there. So you understand who's doing the work, not just the company, but the people. And then when you start to connect with them, you do it from that, hey, Tim, I love the stuff you were doing at Koto. It's brilliant. I've been following you for ages, but you know, that kind of stuff. So, but yeah, just it can feel overwhelming, but there's probably 10 agencies that you should all be following, and just knowing like the trends that are happening and the way things are going and the work that we're doing at the moment and the speed that it's happening at. And that will all help.
What would you say is the hardest part of building a career as a graphic designer, and how could you overcome it?
Oh, another great question. The hardest bit is the fear, right? Is we're never in control. And I heard this great thing on a podcast on the way here. It's like, if it's not maths, it's all fucking poetry. As in, if it's maths, there's a right and a wrong. With what we do, there's no right and a wrong. And I think being able to throw yourself in to asking a question, to performing in an interview, to presenting your work, to all those things that we're naturally uncomfortable with doing, having that mindset to put yourself in those difficult positions and be willing to fail is the thing, because that will then help you in all those different stages of, you know, if you're too scared to fail, you'll never get anywhere. You'll never do great work. You'll never go for that job interview. You'll never move to that city. You'll never, you know, those kind of things. So it's kind of, I think what I did is built a bit of a fake persona, like the guy who is a bit crazy, who, you know, like clients kind of like because he's fun. You know, you kind of build that thing, and then it allows you to be braver and do things that the real Stu might not be able to do. So I think that's part of it. And then just being open to new stuff, I think, like, you know, the next big challenge for you guys is probably university, right? Then you've got getting a job, and then you'll be knowing when to leave that job to take, and that's really like, understand, you know, you might love being at this studio, but you know you need to be here, and that's all here, right? It's your gut. You just have to listen to what your heart and your gut is telling you and be brave and act on it. So it's a bit of a philosophical answer, but I don't know if that helps.
Yeah, it did. Yeah, hello.
Hello.
The question that I have is, when you're you're taking a chance on a designer, what makes you want to take a chance on them? Like when it comes to how their work looks and their character as well.
Brilliant question. Okay, really a simple answer on this one. It's 50-50, right? There's got to be evidence of talent. That could be really raw, it could be really polished and finished, and it doesn't actually matter. As long as we can see how you're thinking, so a clear idea or a sense of how you've unpacked a brief or anything like that, that's the talent side, but exactly the same weight on the person. So I've been doing this for so long now, I can look at the person and just know, and ask you questions around what do you do at the weekend. What I want to know is this a job for you? Are you a 9-to-5er, or are you obsessed with creativity and that inspires how you dress, the museums you go to, the films you watch, where you live, your friends, everything? And it's that mindset of completely and utterly all in, obsessed into this world, and those two together are the deciding factor. Very rarely do you meet the full, perfectly amazing talent, but even if you did, if they were, because the assumption there is there's an arrogance level that comes with that. That's not great for building a company. So you want someone who's hungry, who's open, energetic, and you can pick that up from the interview. So now that's a real thing for you guys. It's as much of who you are and how you are as it is of what you do. And it's the two combined that will get you a job.
All right, thank
Hi.
Hey.
So I really liked your work on those nomad football uniform things. I thought they were really great. But I think it's quite interesting when we think about diversity and inclusivity for the future of design. And do you think that design's future is in celebrating and promoting unity, or promoting diversity and celebrating the differences with each other? Or is it a bit of both?
I think design is always about solving bigger problems, but they'll be solved in better ways through both. Unity less so. I think there needs to be a bit of discourse, a bit of rub, but I think diversity is everything now in terms of diversity of thinking, ideas, how we work, where we come from, how we think, how we feel, all that stuff. And the change that's happened in the last 5 years in terms of the mental side of looking after people and working hard is really positive, and and I think all of that will feed into making what we do as an output much better. And just looking here, it used to be a very white male world. It's not anymore. I know, unfortunately, I can't do much about that, but in the industry now, it's much more diverse. And I think if you look at some of this work I've been talking about, you'll feel that as well. It's not as macho, it's not as slick, it's much more nuanced. But I think unity is difficult because without that kind of challenge and tension, you don't necessarily get great, energetic work.
So do you think you could have perhaps added a personal element to those uniforms that celebrated someone's individuality as well as that unity that was celebrated?
On the laces stuff?
Yeah.
It's a good point. I'd have to think about it. I think the key thing was belonging, so feeling like I've worked with lots of sports clubs over the years, and it's quite interesting when if you go to Man City or Chelsea, whatever, all the staff are wearing a uniform, and you feel like you don't belong, and you feel like an outsider. So it's weird how those formulaic things like uniforms can have a bonding effect. Obviously, we did the names and numbers on the back, so there's a bit of personality there. But yeah, I don't know, to be honest, because I think that job was really about bringing quite a disparate people who come from quite a difficult area in London together through football, and football may not be something that they even know how to play. So you've got to kind of lean into the code of that and everything else. But it's a good question.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you are aware, Confetti is opening a new branch in London. It's nomad. It's hard for a student to get a job. Can we get a job with nomad as students? Seeing that Confetti is opening a new branch there, or workplace much. Is nomad offering any opportunities to people who are still in school learning?
Absolutely. So I was chatting to Pete earlier. We suggested that you guys can come and spend the day with us to start with, so we can host you and show you through our work, and then actually show you the different bits of Nomad. So you've got the motion guys, the project managers, the strategists, the writers, the designers, and you can get a glimpse into how those components work and then how it all comes together. And then even we can help mentor a little bit with our team. And for sure, like, we're always looking for talented people to come and do internships. You don't have to have a degree or be on a degree or anything like that. In fact, back to that diversity thing, we're really looking for people now who've got kind of sideways ways into industry. So the two strategists we've hired, one was a graphic designer, one was an economics major. So we really like people coming from different angles, and encourage you all to reach out. And every studio has an internment kind of program. You should only do it if you get paid at least the working salary of London, which is, I don't know, it's like 10 quid an hour or something. Like, if an agency wants you to work for free, that's really not cool. It doesn't really happen anymore, but it's a bit of a watch out. But I think that's really valuable to do. You probably wouldn't do as long, so a degree graduate might get 3 months or a month. Here we might do 2 weeks to 4 weeks in your summer holidays. But yeah, completely open to that, and to chatting to you guys and chatting through your work, hopefully, at some point.
Right, thank you. That sounds amazing.
As designers, do you think we should be, when creating branding and logos for companies, should we be putting them towards what the company wants, or what you think the company should be going forward? Because I know you did that with Sky a bit, how you said that they were kind of not where they should be, and they should be more of an entertainment company. Do you think that even with smaller companies, you should be trying to help them push forward in their own careers, not just helping yourself as a designer in your field?
Yeah, very good question again. So, but this is quite a complex thing of, there's a few things, right? If you create work for your ego or your portfolio, I believe that's wrong. That anyone, you could do anything you want. It's got to answer a brief or a challenge, but it might not necessarily be what the client thinks or wants. So it's not about arrogance and ego, but it's also not about, like I said, making a client happy. I think the more you know, the more knowledge you have, the more strategic thought you have, the further you can push a client. And for sure, the best work is when we've taken clients way beyond their brief. I think Natural History Museum as well, whilst the answer was in the brief, they weren't expecting that solution, and it was too brave for them. Sky didn't ask us to reimagine their company. We just said, stop selling dishes, start selling dreams. And it was quite an easy narrative that everything kind of pegged to. But that was built on kind of rigorous, it sounds flippant, but there was quite a lot of thought went into that. And we had strategy guys, you know, there was a bit of under the bonnet stuff. So I think it can't be like, I think you should do that. But I think if you can map out a clear vision for where they could go, then definitely take the client on the journey. And that's the thing of not being scared of clients, because they're not us, right? We, as creatives, are the best hour in their calendars. Their days are spreadsheets and finance meetings and, you know, crap suits from M&S and all that kind of stuff. Like, we're the people who bring the energy and the joy and Most of our clients love to have meetings with creatives like us because we're the fun bit. So I think it's leaning into that and helping to take a client further, not being beholden to them.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Only one question left, Stu, is who's won?
I know, yeah. Well, I need some help.
Is it Unity Division? Is it...
Yeah, there was...
Getting a nice little cheeky way from Jay there. I might... Who wants it?
I think... So I forgot your name, with the blue scarf. I think it was your question, yes. It was very good.
Okay, folks, can we please say thank you to
Thanks,
Stuart
guys.
Watson? Okay, thank you very much, folks. Yeah, please keep up to date, keep booking onto things on the Industry Week website. And Morogai is your next talk. That's Thursday, 10 a.m. in here. Yeah, Thursday, 10 a.m. in here. Thank you very much.